This is History They Never Tell. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we dive deep into the hidden, forgotten, and often misunderstood stories that shaped our world, especially the history they want us to forget. Today, we're taking another look at a piece of history that most people think they know, but the real story behind it is vastly different than what you were taught. If you love history, uncovering the truth behind African American history, and learning something new, hit that subscribe button, share the video to anyone that may be interested in topics like this, and be sure to comment to let me know how you feel about the video. Thank you for being here. Now let's jump right into it. For over 400 years, the Atlantic Ocean hid a dark ecological secret. When we study the Transatlantic Slave Trade, we rightfully focus on the human cost, the millions of lives stolen from West Africa, the horrors of the plantation system, and the enduring social impacts across the Americas. But historians and marine biologists have documented another dimension of this tragedy, the profound, artificial impact it had on the ocean itself. During the centuries of the Middle Passage, sharks didn't just accidentally encounter slave ships, they actively tracked them. Schools of apex predators learned to alter their natural migratory patterns. They came to recognize that the geometric, repeating routes from West Africa to the Caribbean and the Americas provided a continuous supply of food. This wasn't an accident. It was an ecological phenomenon created by human cruelty, and eventually it became a calculated tool of terror used by ship captains. Today we examine the documented historical and biological reality of how the transatlantic slave trade altered the marine environment, how ocean predators were weaponized, and how this dark history was captured in literature, art, and abolitionist campaigns. Sharks literally still travel the route of slave ships looking for food, and to understand how marine life adapted to these routes, we have to understand the sheer scale of maritime traffic during the height of the trade between the 16th and 19th centuries. Estimates indicate that over 12 million African men, women, and children were forced onto thousands of European ships. The journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, could take anywhere from several weeks to several months depending on weather conditions. Conditions aboard these ships were notoriously crowded and unsanitary. Ships routinely discarded refuse, waste, spoiled provisions, and the bodies of those who perished during the voyage into the ocean. Because ships followed precise trade winds and established maritime corridors year after year, marine biologists note that schools of sharks began to associate the sound, shadow, and trail of these specific wooden vessels with regular feeding opportunities. In marine ecology, this behavior is known as conditioning or habituation. Predators naturally move toward reliable food sources. Over decades, generations of sharks adjusted their swimming corridors to align with the primary routes of slave vessels, leaving ports like Whydah, Bonny, and Luanda, bound for the West Indies and North America. This phenomenon was not a secret at the time. It was explicitly recorded in the logbooks, personal journals, and memoirs of slave ship captains, sailors, and passengers. Multiple accounts describe large schools of sharks trailing vessels for hundreds of miles across open water. Sailors frequently remarked in their logs that these predators would appear shortly after a ship left the African coast and remain with the vessel until it made landfall in the Americas. Crucially, slave ship captains realized the psychological impact this had on captive Africans. Faced with unimaginable suffering, many captive individuals attempted to revolt or sought to claim their own freedom by jumping overboard into the sea, preferring the ocean to lifelong enslavement. Knowing this, captains deliberately weaponized the presence of sharks. Captives were brought onto the main deck for mandatory exercise, a practice called dancing the slaves, where they could clearly see the waters below filled with marine predators. Captains used this sight as a terrifying psychological deterrent to crush any thought of mutiny or escape. The ocean itself, filled with predators that had been drawn there by the trade, was transformed into a natural fence, a prison wall made of water. The horror of this reality reached a turning point in public consciousness through infamous legal cases and visual art. In late 1781, the British slave ship Zong was navigating toward Jamaica. Due to navigational errors and impending water shortages, the ship's crew threw over 130 living African captives into the sea over the course of several days in an attempt to claim insurance payouts for lost cargo. Historical legal records from the subsequent insurance trial in London documented the horrific details, noting that the waters surrounding the ship were swarming with predators as the events took place. The Zong massacre outraged the public and became a central rallying cry for the global abolitionist movement. Anti-slavery activists, writers, and artists began using the imagery of sharks trailing slave ships to expose the moral horror of the trade to the world. In 1840, British painter J.M.W. Turner exhibited his famous masterpiece, the slave ship originally titled Slavers Throwing Overboard, the Dead and Dying Typhoon Coming On. Turner's painting vividly captured this tragic intersection of human brutality and marine nature, depicting a turbulent, blood-red sea where discarded captives were surrounded by the churning waters and predators below. The painting served as a stark visual indictment of the entire commercial system. When the legal slave trade was finally abolished across the Atlantic nations during the 19th century, the artificial food supply created by these routes eventually ceased. Modern marine historians and environmental scholars point to this era as one of the earliest documented instances of large-scale human activity directly altering the behavior and distribution of major ocean predators across an entire ocean basin. For descendants of the African diaspora, the Atlantic Ocean carries a profound historical memory. It is not just a vast body of water, but a vast historical site holding the memory of millions who made the journey and those who never reached the shore. Understanding this history allows us to see the full scope of the transatlantic slave trade, an event so vast and brutal that its impact extended beyond human societies, leaving a lasting mark on the very ecology of the planet. Thank you for joining us for today's deep dive into this important chapter of history. If you found this video educational, please press the like button, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more documented history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How does learning about the environmental and psychological impacts of the Middle Passage change your understanding of this history? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.